They said he was a good man once, a quiet soul, a loving husband, a father who would have died for his family. But something changed, and on a storm-soaked night in July, something unspeakable happened. He returned from the forest, alone, drenched in blood, carrying only her wedding ring in his clenched fist. No one dared ask where she was, but they all saw the madness slowly bleed into his eyes. The whispers began. He sacrificed her. For wealth, for power, for a future built on betrayal. But what he didn't know was, she never really left. First, it was her voice in the wind. Then her scent in an empty room. Then the dreams, violent, vivid, too real to ignore. And just when he thought he'd silenced her forever, her spirit returned. Not to beg, not to forgive, but to drag him into the same darkness he sent her to. This is the story of a man who traded love for legacy, and awakened a curse no wealth could silence. Before the end, he won't be begging for mercy. He'll be begging for her. But some spirits don't forgive. Do well to subscribe this channel and turn on notification bell. Thank you. The storm that night felt biblical. Rain didn't fall, it attacked. Trees shook, windows rattled, and lightning cracked the sky open like a curse. Then came the figure. From the forest's throat, he emerged, drenched in blood, alone. The village fell silent as he walked, a limp in his step, knuckles clenched around something small. His shirt clung to his chest like second skin, torn and stained. The storm screamed behind him, but his silence screamed louder. He opened his hand, and there it was, her wedding ring. Still warm, still glowing, still dripping. No one asked where she was. No one dared. By morning, the whispers started. Some said they'd seen the couple walk into the forest hours before the rain came. A stroll, a habit, something they often did. But he returned alone. Her laughter never followed. The townspeople avoided his gaze, but their thoughts were loud. Where was she? Why hadn't she screamed? Why did he limp like something had tried to stop him? A prayer circle was called, but even the priests stumbled on her name. Something unspoken lingered in the air, thick, heavy, like wet wool. The forest was silent now, too, as if it had swallowed her whole. They remembered him once as gentle, a man who brought his wife mangoes from the market before the sun rose, who danced with her barefoot when it rained, a man who kissed his daughter's cheeks even in public, and wept when she left for boarding school. His laugh was once a melody. Now, it was a memory. The man they knew had folded into himself like burnt paper, charred, hollow, unreadable. He avoided mirrors. He drank alone. The warmth in his eyes had turned cold, and his voice, when he used it, was cracked. The town stopped saying her name. He already had. Desperation comes dressed as different men. Some in suits, some in cloaks, some in shadows. He met one by the twisted roots of a tree deep in the woods, a man with no face, only a mouth. The promise was simple: give up what you love most, and wealth will flood your doorstep. He laughed at first, then asked what the cost was. The man said nothing, just smiled, as if he already knew the answer. That night, he held her hand tighter than usual. That night, he whispered love into her ears. That night, he made his choice. Weeks passed. The forest grew darker. His home, emptier. Yet sometimes, the scent of jasmine floated through the hallway. Her scent, lingering like memory. No windows open. No flowers in bloom. Still, her presence bloomed through silence. His bed felt colder. Yet sometimes, warm dents formed on her side of the mattress. He convinced himself it was grief. But grief doesn't leave fingerprints on fogged mirrors. Grief doesn't knock at 3 a.m. Grief doesn't giggle behind closed doors. He started sleeping with lights on. Started locking doors that once stayed open. But how do you lock out something that once called you love? One night, thunder cracked so hard the walls trembled. He sat by the fireplace, clutching a bottle, the only warmth in the room. Then he saw it, across the room, cold like she used to, sat a figure. Not moving, just watching. Her head tilted, the way she used to when he rambled. He blinked hard, looked again. Still there. He reached for the light, flicked it on. Empty, just cushions, cold and flat. But when he turned off the light again, there she was. Same spot. Same stare. He didn't sleep that night. The fire died slowly, but her gaze remained. He returned to the forest with a shovel, mud clinging to his boots like guilt. The twisted tree stood waiting, gnarled and hungry. He dug. Not a grave, but a vault. Tossed in a blooded scarf, torn letters, the ring, but it refused to stay buried. The soil spat it back up like a lie. He dug deeper, threw rocks over it. Still, the ground cracked open minutes later, ring glinting in the moonlight. Roots moved like fingers, clawing upward. The tree groaned as if remembering. The air grew colder. And far off, in the dark, he swore he heard humming. At first, they were just dreams. Then, they became nightly trails. He'd wake up screaming, sweat-drenched, clawing at his chest. He saw her standing at the foot of his bed, hair soaked, eyes hollow, hands outstretched. In the dreams, she never spoke, just stared. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Then one night, she touched him, and he woke up with 3 long scratches across his ribs. He stopped sleeping after that, but the dreams followed into daylight. Shadows moved when he blinked. Whispers rode the wind. His skin crawled, even under the sun. Guilt is not a ghost, but it invites one. It began with a crack, subtle, almost elegant, spreading across the bedroom mirror like a thin smile. No impact. No tremor. Just a single sound at dawn, sharp and soft, like glass weeping. He stared at the fractured reflection, but it didn't stare back. Instead, he saw her behind him, pale, soaked, lips blooded. Her eyes held no hate, only mourning. When he turned, the room was empty, but the scent of wet soil filled the air. His reflection changed daily after that. Sometimes his eyes weren't his. Sometimes her hands rested on his shoulders. Sometimes, the mirror wouldn't show him at all. He noticed it in the market first. A woman dropped her yam and ran. Children froze when he passed. A trader whispered and crossed himself twice. Then came the notes, anonymous, folded, trembling. She's not gone. We saw her in your window. You can't bury the truth. But worst were the stares. Not of hatred, but of fear. As if he'd become something contagious. Something cursed. The priest skipped his doorstep. The neighbors boarded up their windows. No one asked questions anymore. They had answers they didn't want. He was no longer the man who lost his wife. He was the man she didn't leave. There was a night he wandered to the river, hoping it could wash away memories the forest wouldn't hold. The current ran wild, violent, hungry. He stood at the edge, the wedding ring still burning in his pocket. He threw it in, watched it vanish beneath the moonlight. But as he turned to leave, something surfaced, small, delicate, glinting. A necklace. The one she wore on their anniversary. The one that vanished with her. It floated, impossibly, against the current. It shouldn't have been there. But there it was. The river, it seemed, didn't want to forget either. Nature, once indifferent to his pain, began to recoil. No birds sang near his home. No crickets chirped. Even the wind changed, less playful, more like breath on the back of his neck. The trees leaned away from his roof, as if they knew what he'd done. Dogs wouldn't enter his yard. The garden wilted without reason. And the skies above his house never cleared, no matter how far the sun rose. He tried to plant flowers where she once knelt. They died within a day. The silence grew so thick it pressed against his ears. Even time tiptoed past him now. Her old room, once a sanctuary, had sealed itself. He hadn't touched it in weeks. But one morning, it stood open. The scent hit first, roses and rust. The floor was clean. The curtains, newly pressed. But there was something wrong with the air, too cold, too still. He stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind him. No matter how hard he turned the knob, it wouldn't budge. Then came the music box. Unwound for years, yet now singing. A lullaby she used to hum. The window fogged over, and across it, 3 words appeared from inside. I never left. He found the ring again, on his pillow. The same one he threw into the river. But now, fused to his palm. He couldn't drop it. Couldn't pull it free. The flesh around it began to blister. Then blacken. Then rot. His skin peeled like parchment. Veins darkened. The pain was constant, pulsing with every heartbeat. He tried to cut it off, tried to burn it, but the more he fought, the more it sank into his hand. At night, he could hear it whispering, not in words, but in breaths, the kind only she had ever taken beside him in bed. He fell to the church steps one night, bleeding from his hand, whispering prayers he hadn't uttered in years. But the doors wouldn't open. Not for him. He wept, not for forgiveness, but for her. For what he'd become. He crawled to the tree where it all began, clutching soil like hope. He screamed into the night that he was sorry. That he'd take it back. That he'd give everything if only she would let him go. The air grew thick. The wind paused. Then came the voice, her voice, singing a song she'd only sung when happy. And in it was no mercy. They found his home empty a week later. No signs of struggle. No blood. Only footprints, 2 sets, leading back into the forest. At the fireplace, a half-burnt letter rested. Unreadable, except for one line, "She came back for me." And on the mantel, the mirror was whole again. But it no longer showed the room, only the woods. A figure, him, walking hand in hand with another. Her outline. Her gown. Her silence. Some say it was justice. Others call it love's revenge. But those who pass the forest at night swear they hear laughter. Then a scream. Then nothing. Some spirits. Don't forgive. Moral lesson. What you sacrifice for power will one day rise and ask for its due. Betrayal of love, especially when it is pure, carries consequences beyond the physical world. The story teaches that shortcuts to wealth or power, when bought at the cost of another's life, trust, or soul, do not lead to freedom, but to haunting. Love, once violated for selfish gain, becomes a wound the spirit cannot ignore. Some wrongs echo beyond death, and not all forgiveness can be begged for.